So today we will just to quickly cover. I think we covered all the basics within the Azure, like public cloud and things like that. So we covered the basic concepts, AKS, and we also deep dived into storage. The net. We touched a little bit on networking and everything. Modern data warehousing and data estates and data bricks, the whole lot. And then, so today we are in the, I would say, the final session. So today's session is composed of three key components. So definitely, one of the component is the AI and ML side, I think. But before we go into that, we'll finish up with the DevOps and the Azure governance. So once we finish it up, we'll jump into the AI side of things, and then close this week off. And then starting next week, so we have Kubernetes session starting on. So that's going to be a very interesting deep dive on Kubernetes. So let's get started now. Two focus areas, So if you think about it, I think pretty much if you think about what we keep hearing the keyword, DevOps constantly, right? So DevOps is basically it's a union of processes, people, and products to enable continuous delivery, for business and end users. So I think this one came through from the concept of the traditional way of operating engineering organizations or any sort of organizations, basically siloed model where individual processes are run on its own with verticalized models. It was okay for certain types of scenarios, but as the complexity of the software and delivery cycles and things like that become complicated, it was not possible to do this. And if you think about the other model, would be an agile model where you run and you host things in a short sprints, ranging for weeks to months. That was okay when companies release software every few months. But on the other world, so right now, if you see the solutions, the products you're using have multiple releases on a given day. So if you use things like Facebook, Amazon, or Instagram, or pretty any solution that you use today have multiple releases. That the agile model will not be able to sustain this whole new thing, right? And also other thing which is happening on the cloud world is pretty much on the DevOps world would be multiple different teams are responsible for offering the single solution stack. It would be engineers, network engineers, software engineers, there'll be testing team. The whole bunch of team has to operate in single unison fashion because an issue could be in any of these places. If you're not having a single unified team, it was not possible. The traditional way, you have a bunch of developers who have siloed model. I think the key point, I think, in my view, is automation become the key fundamental factor of the DevOps. So it could be as simple as infrastructure automation to the entire pipeline automation, because only with automation you're able to have consistent delivery process and consistent solution delivery process, without which we've been challenged. So if you see the traditional model, it was all, there's no automation bits and pieces of it. And the last key update I want to mention is in terms of that the value is from the documentation in terms of how the design aspects are carried over to multiple teams. In the DevOps world, there is a very detailed documentation is provided. On the agile world, maybe they have a documentation, but not to the extent. So in summary, the DevOps, I believe, is where pretty much all the software development is going to go through, and all the companies are going to go. Even in the last few months, because of all the COVID things, I think the DevOps adoption has accelerated much faster, because all of a sudden you have multiple teams who don't work together, who are not sitting in a place, but you still have to get things delivered. I think DevOps is becoming a standard these days. Let me go into. So if you think about toolkit, Microsoft, okay, at the end of the day, what are we offering, right? So there are a couple of key pieces within Microsoft toolkit, which call the DevOps toolkit. The first one is the GitHub, which is the source control repository, And also, not only that, it also has got additional other features like automation, other features are part of the GitHub. And one other tool that people have known, Visual Studio, has been there for a number of years. And I would say, and I wouldn't say recent addition, in the last couple of years, Visual Studio Code has become the de facto, I would say, close to an IDE for a lot of the developments we can do. And then let's look into the other one, which is the deploy, where you're able to get your code and then able to deploy the solution. That's where the things like Azure boards, Azure repos, Azure pipelines, and Azure test and artifacts play a major role. And in the end is basically where the monitoring, okay, you have the application, you build the application, deploy, the operational aspects is implemented using Azure Monitor. Azure Monitor is the single unified, I would say, tool to capture any services you deploy on Azure. You're able to capture all the metrics using Azure Monitor. And also application insights is basically similar to Datadog or New Relic, or in this basically application monitoring perspective. It's also a single pane of glass is provided through Azure Monitor. The last one is Azure Security Center, which is about a single tool where it becomes like a fabric which can capture any type of security related activities within Azure. We will touch base on that today in terms of security aspects of it. I would say these three, I would say the build, deploy, and operate, all the modeling is encompassed using Azure DevOps is basically, I would say, single solution stack within Microsoft. So if you think about what I've done is I've taken different aspects of each and every different processes in the CI/CD model, because for each one of these components, there is a mapping functionality, or there is a mapping feature set within the Azure DevOps ecosystem. And based on your needs, you can basically pick one of. So, for example, if you take the continuous delivery, if you take the infrastructure as a IaaS deployment, there are tools within the Azure DevOps ecosystem to do that. It could be an ARM template, it could be Terraform, it could be Ansible, or it could be Puppet. So there are modules within that help you do that. If you think about shared services model, infrastructure code, for each and every functionality, there is a mapping functionality within the Azure DevOps ecosystem to get these things done. So the whole idea of this slide is to give you different functions and activities you might do in a DevOps cycle. So the whole idea of this is to give you a big picture end to end. Let's see, even if you take a simple things like continuous security, right? So within the continuous security, there are multiple different variations. If you take the compliance and risk and audits, within Azure, we have Azure policies, blueprints, which we'll touch today. And that would basically bake that into introduce your DevOps processes. So everything is from Azure point of view, everything is the integrated lifecycle of products and solutions in its entirety versus individual components you have to tie in together. But these components come in pre-built within the Azure DevOps ecosystem. So that's a core idea of this slide deck. So I think just for people that are getting into this Azure DevOps world, the DevOps by itself is a whole branch of session needs to be done. So there are a couple of key components. One is Azure boards. So basically, it's about you're able to have think about it as like a project planning or management tool where you're able to capture, track activities across your teams, which is usually this single tools that can help you do that. The second one is pipelines. You're able to build any CI/CD pipeline using the Azure pipelines. Azure repos is basically unlimited. It's like it's a Git repo. In this case, these Git repo can also be integrated with GitHub. So there's an option there, and also the test plans, you're able to build your test plans. And the last one is artifacts. Artifacts help you to take the package and share it across. So, so with this, there are a lot of other components apart from these. At least these components would give you a very basic introduction to the Azure DevOps. And the main thing is you can actually join Azure if you go to look for Azure DevOps, Microsoft Azure DevOps. You can join in without any cost, because for the first 5 users, because there is no cost for it. So I just want to touch base on other aspects of on the CD continuous delivery practices. So one of the I would say fundamental concept in the CD is to basically ability to build fully automated builds. And also other thing is, everything is in source control, right? So these are the two, I think, if you think about the primary mandate in the CD is basically you should be able to constantly builds has to be automated. For example, a code might get checked into your repo, and all of a sudden it should trigger a process to get that code through is iterations. Maybe make it test, do all the security validations, and deploy the code. But again, I'm just touching on a very high level, but each and every project might have a different variations on it. So one of the mandates within Azure DevOps is ability for customers to enable CD practices constantly. And if you think about it, there are things within the chat, like if you think about canary deployment and blue-green deployment model, these are different models enterprises tend to use. But again, within the CD practice is one of the mandates of that. So we'll touch base on what each one means. So basically, automated deployment is basically you script the entire automation. So basically, all your artifacts are stored in a single repository, and then you basically take the same process across your all environments, being lab, non-prod, and production, so that there's a consistency in the model. It also, one of the mandates is also including smoke tests depending on the use cases. Customers can introduce their own the smoke test as a part of it. Again, the idea is on this particular focus on this particular concept is basically talk about a little bit on automated deployment as you go, as within your project cycle, you might have different variations of it, but just to give you a highlight, what does automated deployment mean? So I think we spoke about touch based on the previously on the tools. Azure Pipelines is one of a key component. So if you think about it, the pipeline usually a pipeline within a customer deployment can have multiple different types of source codes. You can deploy Node.js, Python, Java, it doesn't matter what it is. And at the same time, multi-cloud is a de facto standard. You might having a same piece of code to be deployed in GCP, AWS, and Azure. So Azure Pipelines also works with this, or any type of cloud platform, including on-premises. So that's something to take away from this whole notion of Azure. See, if you think about Azure DevOps, it's not only I wouldn't call it as a Microsoft tool, but it's a generic tool that you can use to target any platform you want. So the second one is extensibility. If you have because it supports YAML and other and also you can actually have extensions within the Azure pipelines where you can have custom additions to the Azure pipelines. And also one other thing is it can also integrate natively with Docker Hub and Azure container registry. So if you have any Kubernetes type deployment, it can also be part of it. And the last one is it's one of the best in open source. And also we also give you a free minutes. So when you get it, you get a free minutes for build pipeline. I think it's about 10 parallel jobs. But if you can always have additional minutes by getting into a licensed or subscription model. So the whole idea of Azure Pipeline is able for customers to have any type of code and able to build the pipelines and deploy in any platform of their choice. And it is not restricted to a single platform. Additionally, you can extend the pipelines to whatever you need to do according to your needs. You can extend them as you feel like. So I think I'll skip. Let me go back. I think I skipped a few slides here. So there are So there are certain things which is happening within the Azure pipelines is also the ability for you to see the entire GUI into a YAML pipeline. So I think one of my understanding in terms of using YAML is a single constructive language in terms of how your pipelines are defined. The entire components can be seen as a YAML flow in end-to-end, which means without any GUI, you can actually do it. It also helps you another thing. Because it's all in YAML file, you can also keep that as a source control and keep it as a repository if you want to do it. So I think that's the whole idea of this this problem. So I have given you a couple of additional links on it where you can go dig deeper. So the idea, the whole idea of the session is to just to give you a touch base on this, and definitely if we need to go deeper on this, maybe next year we're looking to do an Azure DevOps deep dive. At least with this one, it should give you a couple of key inputs on what are the feature sets within Azure DevOps and what are the issues we are able to address it. But this is again, it's a deep subject on its own. So if you want to go into it, I can share you some additional links and contents on this one. So that's basically gets you into the next section, which is on the security and other aspects of it.
That's correct, Krishna, right? So the Krishna is basically taking the cloud fundamentals session, right? So even though he went into a little bit more details, but the core of the session that we are completing today is the cloud fundamentals. And I believe strongly, Krishna, you put a strong base introducing different concepts in the cloud within the framework of Azure, right? So it's easy for us to understand with this basic concept how it is applied also for other like GCP or Amazon, because the concept remains the same, whichever cloud that we are using, right, in our day job or will be using in future. So from that point of view, I strongly believe you have provided us a great foundation. And like you mentioned, this year we are more or less packed for rest of the programs. Next year we are going to pick each of these topics in Cloud Fundamentals Krishna presented, and we're going to identify the trainer to provide us a deep dive into those coding aspects of all the concepts that we learned so far from you, Krishna. That's the plan.
Yeah. And again, I got you to, thanks for that. So Partha, I will get back to you on that particular question on converting your Jenkins into YAML file. I have an expert with me, which I can get back to you shortly. Okay. Sorry, but I'm not an expert on this one, but definitely get back to you on that.
Thanks.
And also, thanks. And also, I shared a link from one of my, I would say, she works in HCL. She has written a paper on specifically on DevOps and agility in COVID-19. So it's a very good paper. I'll definitely, share the details on it. If you're interested, let me know. She's one of our co-authors for building Azure DevOps pipeline and infrastructure set of things. I can do another short session on that next year, hopefully. I'm just running through this fast. Again, it's a deep subject from a fundamentals perspective. I just want to touch base on a couple of key points and then go into it. So I want to go into, I think one of the key meat of the presentation today would be on the Azure governance and other things on policies and blueprints. So if you think about it, the IT is transforming, right? So when IT is transforming, I also want to mention the entire business life cycle is transforming significantly. So previously, when you go and do a project or when you do any work with anybody within your organization, the concept of project planning, project management, all related to a very single siloed processes, right? So there would be a team, there would be like a project team, there would be IT team, there would be management infrastructure team, all on a silo. They try and do a project and then basically, hey, you have a project plan, then everything. But that's not possible in this today's world because the entire IT is transforming. I'll give you a very simple example. So if you see what's happening in the media and entertainment space, as an example, right? Previously, content, companies would have a media distribution arm where they will they procure media content and then they publish it after a few, once the theatrical release is done, and then they come into this set-top boxes and the things get published automatically. Customers see it. It doesn't matter whether they like it or not. It's a streaming platform. But after the influx of on-demand or OTT, all of a sudden there's a whole concept of customers' preferences jumped in, right? If customers have more choice now, there are more options, and if they don't like a particular, product or program, they can always say like or dislike, and that changed the whole dynamics of how media is created and distributed, right? If you think about traditional media companies, they didn't have that problem before, where they always have a very fixed channel. So one classic example I want to mention is if you see the Trolls movie, which was supposed to release on theaters, but they couldn't because of the COVID. They went into the streaming platform directly, and that basically dynamically changed how the entire business of streaming worked. For example, as I understand, it took a couple of months in the theatrical release of version 1 of the Trolls to collect money from a couple of $1 million, but on the streaming platform they're able to get the same amount of money within a couple of days. So there's a whole dynamics of change. So what I want to go with this is, which means in this scenario, you should have a entire transformation, not only from specific to hosting the platform, but also the entire end-to-end platform has to change. So if you think about it, the marketing organization has to change to be in tune with all the technological advancements. The sales organization has to change in terms of how they're able to distribute these products, because previously ads, when they used to go to a physical location, there are additional things they can sell. That could be food and things like that. All of them things gone. The third one is customer response and feedback. If a customer doesn't like it, within few minutes he might like or dislike. The entire equation changes. So if you think about, if you put this into a solution stack, that if you take just one business of media before the advent of streaming and after advent of streaming, it's entirely changed. That also brings other challenges. How are we going to manage the support organization which are supporting these distributions? How are you able to write a piece of software? So a few days ago, I was listening to a music composer. So one of the challenges is articulating it. When he composes a specific music in the olden days, he used to just worry about only one thing: CD player, and the music always sounded the same. Doesn't matter what medium it is, because you can encode everything in the CD. But today you have Spotify, you have YouTube, you have Apple Music, you have additional new platforms, and each platform have a certain encoding mechanisms baked into it, right? Which means when you able to, and also other thing is there are some connections are good, some connections are bad, which means you need to encode the same song in about 20 to 25 different forms. In order for that, he has to change the entire workflow of even the music production process. So which means the technology has been placed. Just want to mention that the transformation is not just in one place. The transformation is happening across. If you take that and apply to any industry as of today, it's the entire equation is changing. So there is no more hardware and software anymore. Pretty much everything is software driven. And second one is operational model has changed. So the developer ecosystem has changed, and also the business value. And the key thing which has changed is time to market, which is now, I think, the time to market life cycles are very, very short. If customers want something, they want it immediately, as you can see all the changes. So in summary, the entire IT transformation is happening in a rapid phase. This is where the entire concept of automation and everything comes into play. I'll just go into that shortly. Hopefully, I set a stage on what are the things I'm going to talk about. So this is where a key mandate comes in: governance. Okay, when these things are changing at such a rapid pace, okay, your traditional model, your governance model is very straightforward, especially on the engineering aspects. There is a developer, is building something, and there is an operation team, and these two are distinct entities. And there is some sort of intermediary custodian or like a security process or like a architecture process. So it's very straightforward, right? Because everything is waterfall, everything goes to streamline, no problem at all, right? And this is, if you think about if you worked in large enterprises, you might see an enterprise architecture team that is mandated to build all the architectures, and that would be like once they approve a certain architecture, the architecture stays same for months and years together, and then developers as well as operation will always follow the process. On the cloud world, it's not the same way. So this is whole bunch of new equation comes in. So as the diagram indicates, all of a sudden the model is flipped in its entirety. For example, today, as a developer, you can build any piece of code and deploy that into a so-called cloud environment and have the scale and ability without having any issues in terms of traditional challenges. You don't worry about hardware anymore. You don't worry about software anymore. You don't worry about scaling. You don't worry about data center disaster down because you have availability zones and availability sets, multiple different variations of it. But where it gets complicated is how do you govern this whole thing? I'll give you a very simple example. If you see storage systems today, I would say there is unlimited storage available. At the same time, when you have unlimited storage available, your security becomes challenged, right? So how do you manage your same security compliance into the cloud? The second one is your identity also becomes challenging. Previously, in your if you have a platform, maybe you have 1,000 people watching it. Now all of a sudden you have millions of people watching it. How do you manage that user management? And what is your enterprise policies? Give you a very simple example. If your content has to be displayed only in Canada, as an example, because of your DRM requirements, how do you enforce those policies? And because of the way the cloud is operating, how are you able to have a blueprint? Blueprint is basically the same compliance security model baselines. How are you able to do? How are you able to copy that across multiple deployments consistently? I got to tell you something. If you think about products like Azure, on a given day, it will have hundreds and thousands of releases constantly being pushed across. So if in that scale, if you're able to, even if you misconfigure a single piece of the configuration, all of a sudden your code or your data or your compliance or anything might be exposed, right? So this is where the blueprints comes into play. Blueprints basically able to build a standardized model where you're able to consistently deploy everything at the same form without changing anything at any given point in time, as because the underlying software layer is able to take it. So the last one is cost. If you think about governance, and there are security governance, there are compliance governance model, there is infrastructure governance. I think the main governance model which enterprises are very keen is cost management. Because of the nature of the cloud, you have a ability to overspend without even realizing it. Because everything is automated, everything is easily done, but you need to have cost optimizations too, right? So in that case, how are you going to do that is cost management has to be baked in as a process. So again, that's where I would say the cost management is on Azure is very straightforward, where you're able to fix a cost of a deployment using tools and technology. So which means you have a fixed cost, because at the same, when you think about cost, it's not only the cost of the services, the cost of operations too. So cost management becomes a huge challenge on the cloud. That's where the governance we can in Azure help you do that as well. So if we talk about tools and technologies, I want to touch base on a couple of key points for you guys. The first point I want to mention is if you take about the development aspects of it, there are three key pieces, right? The first one is the policies. If you think about policies, policies in Azure are basically a set of defined rules for your specific deployment. What are defined rules are? So I'll take a very simple example. In your, let's say you're running a media platform in Canada, and one of the agreements you have with your media vendor is that you won't host the contents outside of Canada. Okay, that's a policy you have to implement. The second policy you want to implement is only IP addresses from the Canadian region can access. That's the second policy you apply for it. The third policy you might want to apply for it as well. Certain types of encryption standards has to be enforced. HTTPS, SCG 256. These are the policy models you want to enforce it. And at the same time, you also want to make sure it's available as a piece of code so that you manage policies as a code versus traditional configuration model. So that's one piece of the development cycle. Next is come to blueprints. Okay, I have for enterprise, let's take the media example. You want to make sure to reduce the time to market. You want to pre-build configurations. You want to pre-build your access, and you want to pre-build all your policies. That's where the blueprint comes into play. Blueprint is basically you structure your entire governance into various subsections and then put them into a blueprint, which means anytime a new, any type of environment spins up, they all follow the same blueprint. So if you think about it, enterprises, because of the nature, they constantly span and spin new services or new deployments. Blueprints helps you to have the same form of the configuration deployment in your enterprise, so that your cost of operation reduces significantly. And also one major advantage of this is you are from ability to scale increases significantly. It's a very simple concept, right? Once you have a structured model, the scale becomes easier to implement. And the last one is governance, right? Okay, you able to build the policies, you able to consistently able to deploy it on the same fashion. But okay, how do you want to govern this one? Which governance in this scenario we can call it simply, we can basically simply call it as somebody watching over all the things which are basically somebody policing the entire deployment, entire configuration into a single form. How are you going to do that is basically that's where you have IT governance comes into play. The IT governance is composed of a couple of key things. One is a security-based IT. Let's take a security-based IT governance. Okay, one of the security governance model you want to implement would be cost management. Sorry, in terms of all the services all these services to be deployed in Canada. How are you going to watch it? Is by have an alert mechanism where anybody deploys the service outside of Canada, you're going to get a notification, right? So things like that can be implemented using Azure Security Center or Azure Sentinel. So if you think about it, there is a policy as a code. And the second one is the blueprint. The third one is governance. If you put them into a package, you have an end-to-end deployment of your cloud environment, which is fully managed, tightly controlled, and within the given cost budget, you're able to do everything on an enterprise scale. So the reason I'm spending more time on this one is enterprises today are moving toward this model. Not every enterprise is on this one, but a lot of the I would say traditional companies have started moving towards this direction. I think that's getting more and more prevalent. So I'll touch base a couple of the key points I spoke here on this one. So how are you going to implement these ones? So let's in Azure we have a concept called management groups. Think about management groups as like let's take the streaming example. In the streaming example, there is a hierarchy. The top hierarchy would be a management group. In the management group, you will set policies and governance and models for across the enterprise. Usually, traditionally, in a so-called enterprise architect group tend to have a loosely coupled management model. But in this scenario, it's basically, since it's on the cloud, you as an enterprise architect or enterprise lead would be able to set up a governance policy across the enterprise. So which means there are certain negotiable, certain attributes are negotiable, but pretty much majority is fixed in stone. The second one is policy enforcement. Okay, you set up the management group, and how do you enforce, right? Without enforcement, there is no need, there is no value in setting these policies up. Constantly evaluate. So on the real-time basis. For example, you might enable all storage accounts should be HTTPS enabled. When somebody goes and changes it, how do you track it? How do you manage it? When somebody breaks a policy knowingly, or unknowingly, how do you capture that? So which means a real-time monitoring is baked into the platform itself, right? Because that's where, if you think about last week, we spoke about event grids. Event grids is basically one type of mechanism where any changes to any attribute of a service, automatically something would trigger. Same way the policy are applied to an Azure resource, and anytime the policy deviates from the predefined rule, alerts can be triggered and you can do remediation on the fly. Obviously, we talked about blueprints. Blueprints are basically a pre-built pattern that can be applied, cookie cutter pattern across your subscriptions. And the last one is resource graph. Okay, so these are fantastic. I can be able to define the policies, build the managing groups, but where do you see the data, right? For example, if you want to find out, show me all the resources in my deployment which have certain attributes and certain characteristics. So resource graphs are getting more and more important because every single Azure resource is basically considered as a table within the backend, and these table form attributes. For example, if you take a compute, it will have an attribute of a CPU, memory. It will have attribute of storage and things like that. So these information are available through you as a customer using resource graphs. So resource graphs are getting more prevalent these days because using resource graphs, you treat your entire deployment as like a database table or database, and you can query on your attributes on runtime, on real time, as you do a select star from a database, right? And the last one is cost. Cost is going to be a very key driver. See, at the end of the day, cloud brings you so many capabilities. At the same time, if cloud is expensive than your traditional on-premises deployment or on-premises this one, the value proposition, the return on investment, and the business justification for a cloud would diminish rapidly. So that's why cost management is a key functionality within this one. So we have the whole governance structure, architecture. So I will share that with you guys. I think one key point I want to mention is within Azure, there's a I would say there's a feature or functionality or a core engine called Azure Resource Manager. So Azure Resource Manager is a single resource tool that single-handedly manages every type of resource you can possibly have. Basically it's a every single Azure resource request goes through ARM template Azure Resource Manager. So it manages, governs all the resources within Azure, and so that's one of the key takeaway for you guys is that single layer is the one which able to interact with you as an end consumer using Portal or CLI or Terraform or I would say Puppet. All has to go through single entry point, which is called ARM template, and from there you can have additional components on it. So I think I'll share this information to you guys. It's about all the policies and definitions and blueprints. So I'll skip them through. In the end, I just want to give you a quick key components of security feature within Azure, right? So if you think about it, starting with the left-hand side, which is identity. The reason identity plays a major role in the cloud world is your traditional security model from a security perspective within your enterprise is all based out of network. Enterprises have the concept of, if it's in my network, it's secure. If it's outside my network, it's not secure. That was fine till few years ago when everything was sitting within your data center. But the minute you're able to you started exposing your services to the external world, where the public cloud infrastructure came in, the paradigm shifted from your something sitting within network to the outside the network. So in that outside the network, how do you manage security? One way you manage security is using identity. So identity through Active Directory, Azure Active Directory in this scenario, is one of the primary mandates where you're able to control your access, control your security using tokens, using authorization, using keys and things like that. So that's why I want to mention the identity is the core of the engines to start with. And obviously data protection, right? So how do you protect data? Couple of ways. You could encrypt the data using the highest encryptions possible, like SHA-256. Additionally, you can also start doing things like confidential computing. So briefly touch basing on confidential computing is basically think about this. So between the CPU and your memory, when the process is running through, this there some of these instructions can be going through in a clear form. Confidential computing takes this to the next level where your data still be encrypted as it is, but the CPU is able to process the encrypted data and get the same results. It's a whole branch of new engineering. It all came from Intel's specialized chipset they built a few years ago. Especially on a database workload-driven projects, I find confidential computing is getting more and more prevalent. There are certain class of Intel chips that are used to do this confidential computing model. And the network security is basically your traditional layer 3, so layer 4, layer 7 security model, your DDoS protection, and connecting to private using ExpressRoute. And the last one is, I would say, I'd classify them as Azure Security Center is basically your always on security paradigm where deployment of resources is one thing, but Azure Security Center lives at the fabric layer where it's able to constantly monitor all the assets in real time. It's basically it protects you from every single potential threats you might have on different resources. So yeah, so that's something which has to be covered in a later topic. But these are the key, I would say, components of the security framework for Azure. So I think that brings me to the next one, which is the AI and ML. If you guys want to have a quick break, I don't mind giving you that, and then we'll come back here. And in the meantime, I also want to answer a question from Rajan. Yes. So Rajan, you can code which region that particular service can be deployed. Yes, as part of your blueprint, you can define that. And then once you define it, every single assets or resources can live only in that region. A lot of customers use that as for the compliance data residency. Kadir, I just want to give you 5 minutes break so that I'm going to have maybe another 15-20 minutes after this, and then we can come back. Is that okay? Maybe I need to finish off. I need another 15 minutes to touch base on the ANML. Maybe can we come back in 11:20 after bio break?
Yeah, let's take a 3-minute bio break and
Yes.
and cover EAML. Yeah, thanks for putting extra time, Krishna, to cover this EAML. Appreciate it. Yeah.
No problem, Jalal. Man.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be back. I know I just need a glass of water. Be back in by 11:20. Thank you,
Sure.
guys.
Yeah. I'm back to Krishna. You good? If you want to get started.
Okay, guys, thanks for the time. So I'm going to quickly, again, this is going to be, we're going to have a deep session, right, Kadir? In about
after the microservices and Kubernetes, 5 weeks.
Yep.
We're going to get into the AI session, and mostly it's focused on Python, AI using Python, right? Kind of a thing.
Yep.
Yeah, so there's going to be a little bit of detail, but we will also get into the detailed session of AI ML, how to do it using Microsoft platform next year, right? But for now, we are starting with the basics, step by step, one step at a time. Yeah.
Yep. So again, I just want to quickly touch base. I worked with two of my teammates, Jaya and Shad, to work on the content. So let's start with a quick introduction, right? If you think about the machine learning in it's a very simplest form. You're teaching the machine to do something repeatedly. This could be as simple as teaching a machine to find out a commonly occurring pattern. This could be by teaching them some mathematical model where, hey, identify cat pictures, versus a dog picture. So it's basically the way you do that is you build some models and then you teach the models, able to get the data point and then analyze it. So that is one way of doing it. So AI is one step ahead of it, where you applying the machine learning to solve real world problems. Okay, for example, in this sample, so you're teaching the AI to go and find out what are the objects in this particular picture, and then you help them to make a decision on that. It could be as simple as for finding out pedestrian crossing, if somebody is sending an alarm or things like that. So the whole bunch of things that can be done on it, right? So self-driving cars is one way. If you use Tesla, that you know basically Tesla as more than a car, it's a computer. Basically, constantly keeps learning how it interacts with the real world, and these data fit into it. It's able to react to you as an object versus individual as a physical car, right? So and then the output can be in the form of classifiers, regressors, and clusters. So the whole notion of the machine learning, I hopefully understand machine learning is basically you're teaching the machine to repeatedly do something. And the second one is AI is basically taking the inputs from a machine learning model, and then you're able to solve some real world problems onto that. One second, I'm getting some challenges with the screen. Okay. So there are a couple of key machine learning algorithms. One is supervised learning. In this scenario, there's the data is very well labeled. In this case, there are well-known data models or data patterns available. There are two would be decision tree. So and also other one is logistics logistics regression. The second one is unsupervised learning, where the data is not labeled, but you're able to find hidden patterns within the data using certain parameters. The last one is the reinforcement learning, where you're able to teach the model by using trial and error. So these three are the key ML algorithm models that can be used to defer information from the data using with the data sets you have. And deep learning is also one of the subset of your machine learning, where you have a whole bunch of models are trained by using large labeled data sets, and from the data sets you're able to build a neural network that can take that can actually make decisions without any supervision or without any external inputs from a data scientist. But one of the challenges that you have with the deep learning is you need to have voluminous data to have that sort of model. So that's where, if you think about a lot of the, I would say every single company in the planet have some sort of a deep learning engine enabled within them, so that they can solve a lot of big challenges using the existing known data sets. If you think about in today's day and age, if you think about Netflix as an example, they run tons of deep learning model to understand what type of content they have to produce. What type of, for example, as I understand, House of Cards, one of the series was built based on the so-called data point they collected and applying the deep learning models for it as well. So within that, there are three. If you think about AI, there are three key components that are used in to enabling these AI. One is the sense, comprehension, and the one is act. So if you think about sensory, it could be computer vision, where the computer is able to see an object and able to react. It could be virtual agents. Audio processing could be identity analysis. For example, if you're able to call Siri or Hey Google or Alexa, that's where the application processing, that's where the applications that's using audio, it's able to capture the audio and react to it. If you're noticing on the translate, that's basically one of the applications. If you can see whatever I speak, even with my tonal accent is able to comprehend, is because of the audio processing. And the second one is comprehension. So it's basically natural language processing, where cognitive robots are being used. And the last one is the machine learning, which is very well known pattern would be recommendation systems, which when you go to any shopping or Amazon or shopping channel, or even watching a normal television or even YouTube, you can see the recommendation system is going to give you some recommendations based on your preferences and your pre-existing knowledge about you as a user, and is able to suggest potential options for you as well. So if you think about it, the AI technology is classified into three: sensory, comprehension, and able to use those to build some real activities on it. So within enterprises, there are two ways companies are able to use AI at enterprise level. So one is pre-built AI models, okay, and the second one is custom AI models. So if you think about pre-AI models, if you think about you as an enterprise, depending on your ecosystem and the food chain or where you are in, it's not always possible to collect volumes of data. I'll give a very simple example. If you want to build a model, if you're a call center company, and then you want to build a huge database of different types of responses customers are going to give with various different accents, it's not possible for you as an enterprise to build that. But there are companies like Microsoft, Google, Amazon. They all have libraries of data that is available for them through collections and things like that, and there's a pre-built models available for you to build on top of that, right? So that's where the pre-built model, AI models, are very, very critical. The second one is sometimes you might want to build your own custom AI models, so which means where you have a very unique set of problems, okay? And then for the unique set of problems, you want to build your own custom AI models. In that case, you can do that as well. But you also understand that which you want to build something that is the way the language pretty much uses R and Python. And then and also other challenge with this one is you definitely need deeper pockets for building these custom AI models, depending on where your equation is. So in an AI, the way you use an enterprise is using pre-built models or custom models. So if you think about, okay, these are all good, what does Azure offer within the ecosystem? There are a couple of key components. One is, if you think about tooling perspective, again, the so-called tool sets which we spoke about, the Visual Studio Code is basically available for AI. And two key components we have within Azure is called the ML Machine Learning Studio and the Workbench. So these are basically pre-built tools available for customers to build any type of AI ML solutions. On the top, on additional ones, customers can also use TensorFlow from any third-party learning frameworks. If you come to the left-hand side, so there are three components. One is if you want to build your own custom AI, as we previously saw, Azure offers the Azure machine learning ones. But you know what? I don't want to do anything. I want to use a pre-built. That's where the cognitive services API comes into play. If you go to cognitive services, it has got number of pre-built AI models that can be used. But the last one is conversational AI. So, for example, if you want to build a bot, the purpose of the bot is to say, let's take a very simple example, finding what is the weather, right? You want to ask the bot, hey, what is today's weather like? It will come up with a response. And for that, we have built a platform called the bot framework. And one extension of this is called, if you heard about Microsoft Power Tools, Power Automate, we have a whole notion of low code, no code concepts, and a lot of them are depending on the bot framework. On the underneath, if you look at infrastructure, there are key components. One is we have massive compute layers, which is basically using Azure Container Services, the Spark, and Batch AI, and the databases we spoke about on the data. I would say databases like Cosmos DB, NoSQL, SQL Data Warehouse, the whole bunch of data services is available. And the interesting piece I want to mention is the FPGA and GPU. FPGA is basically field programmable gate arrays, where you can start programming your chip as you program a piece of software. So customers do have option of building their own, I would say, components at the chip level using FPGA, and obviously GPU is basically based on NVIDIA chips. This can also be used to crunch huge volumes of data. And as a framework, these components are available for customers to build anything they want on AI. And if you think about it, a couple of years ago, if you want to build anything on AI, you need to have massive investments in terms of infrastructure cost, services, data sets. But as of today, all the services are available to you as out-of-the-box solution as part of Azure, which is a huge paradigm shift, because all you need is an idea and a couple of dollars to spend. Boom, you have a solution out of the box within Azure. And the next couple of sessions, I'm going to touch base on how do you get started on the pre-built AI. If you go to the cognitive services, there are decision, speech, language, vision. These are pre-built AI models available for you to go and look for it. It also got pre-built samples. When you go into it, it's also got pre-built examples as well. So that's one way to explore the pre-built AI using the cognitive services feature. And as I was explaining, it does gives you a nice, I would say, a window. And then, so for example, in this example, you can ask question like, hey, in this question, what is the number of COVID cases that's matched? Is able to go and collect data from existing data points and able to publish the information right within your frame, within a UI, without you doing anything out of it. So you can click on the link. You can actually try out the example as given here. And if you want to go into custom AI, we talked about the Azure Machine Learning Studio. So where you can build your entire end-to-end pipeline of custom AI using a pre-built dashboard. It's got different input parameters into it, and it's fully baked in UI model. There is no scripting involved. You drag and drop and then build the AI model out of the box. This is again a massive innovation in my view, because previously, if you want to build anything of this nature, you need to know deep understanding of some of languages like R or Python. But with this pre-built workbench model, you can build drag and drop. And then, as you can see, the sample here shows we're able to build out of the box, build it, deploy it with little or no time. And one advantage is you can deploy them as a web APIs. So within the web API, this can be invoked using any external service, and that's one advantage is you can design, build, and execute within the same platform. It also gives you a Python notebook form. Notebooks are basically one way of exposing the underlying services using a Python style. So the Python notebooks are a de facto way of interacting with the custom AI. And also, if you don't want to do any of those things, then we have images like Data Science VM. So Data Science VM is basically a single virtual machine which has got all the necessary tools for building any type of data science project, including AI and ML. So that single VM is basically has got every single tools you need to build any type of solution you want. It's basically it's what we call them a data science in a box. It also helps you. Previously, what I understand is when you want to start any of these projects, you have to go and find out tools and technologies. With this single virtual machine, everything comes pre-built for you. So the reason I want to put this one is I was just doing some homework on why AI and ML are all the components are very critical at this point in time. So I was just looking for interesting use case on the deep learning scale. So as of today, as of 2021, Tesla would have driven about 4 billion miles in terms of actual kilometers. So which means it has accumulated all the data points, all the learnings from driving for 4 billion miles, and the amount of information it has gathered it's so huge that you could have definitely seen every permutation combination of things possibly you can have. So what that gives you is if you go and look on the YouTube, you'll be amazed by the amount of knowledge at this point in time Tesla has got about every single thing that could happen on a given vehicle and how we can interact with it. So if you think about why Tesla is one of the top innovators on this particular space, if you are Tesla, if you want a Tesla, you know how intelligent it is. So the reason I bring that is when Tesla was started, in 2015, they had less than a couple of million, but now have 4 billion. If you see the growth they have within the last 4 years, is extremely fascinating. So just go and look at the YouTube. I just looked at for a few minutes. The number of data points it shares is amazingly interesting. Where I want to take with the next action item for you is there are a couple of key books I really want to suggest. The first book I want to suggest is basically about from Jim Simons about the quant revolution. So as I understand, this particular book is about a cryptographer that is based. He's able to understand or comprehend the entire stock market, how it works, and is able to build consistently higher returns on investment, which beats the market average by X percentage every year. It's a fascinating it's a fascinating book about how this particular trader, he used to be a scientist. He built this entire model, and then what he did is in 1970s or 80s, he took the entire stock market analysis for the last 150 years in 1980 and able to build an entire model based on it. And then as computers get more and more powerful, there's no human beings trade any of these stocks. It's basically only computers do that. And within the computers do these analysis and buy and sell at rapid speeds, they're able to beat any of the, I would say, stock market managers by a couple of percentage points. And they're able to, this book is extremely fascinating and talks about how we're able to connect a real world problem in terms of stock market with the machine learning and AI model composed into a single solution. The next one is, as you might know, Andrew Ng is one of the topmost teachers in terms of the deep learning. And also, I also found out the World Bank has opened up pretty much every imaginable data you need to know about different problem sets. If you're interested, you can go and look into it. And also Waymo has also opened up. Waymo is another, I would say, a car company which is trying to build a solution for it. So these are 3 links I want to share. And one of the mandate in terms of, one other question is always get to say, what skills you need. I listed a couple of skills that you need to have a step into the AI and ML career model here. So if you want to start your journey, these are the pre-built. Microsoft has got a AI school. I would definitely want you guys to go and take a look at it and start learning from it. So that gets me into the last of the session here. I think this finishes the entire, I would say, 15 weeks of work. So just as a touch base, we're going to have a deep dive on AI and ML the subsequent week. The next week we will start with Kubernetes platform, and then following that we'll have other interesting sessions too. Kadir, I want to give the floor to you.
Yeah, there's a couple of things, right? So the first thing is, as you all know, it is the sessions are recorded and uploaded in the YouTube for your offline, because some of the slides rush through. You can always look through the YouTube. And if you also wanted to look through the slides, you must have an account into the Microsoft Teams of Testoper community, right? So if I look at today's attendance, there are a few people, like for example, VelVC. I believe you have not logged in through the Testoper account for the today's session. Same thing, Sandeep, for you. And yeah, so if you wanted to get access, you need to log in into the Testoper account, and in the Teams, you can actually go to the Codathon channel, and files, you would find this presentation for you to refer offline. That's the first thing I want to say. And the second and the last thing I wanted to say is, it's not saying, it's actually wanted to thank, join me. You all also have to join me in thanking Krishna for his continuous effort of 15 weeks to deliver the session, from which we all have learned so many things, right? So many things. And I'm sure that you appreciate whatever that you have learned from Krishna. Join me in thanking Krishna for his tremendous effort, the intention to help the people, be the part of community, to share the knowledge what he has with others. These are all the skills and qualities not everyone has, or nor you get everyone to really do these kind of helps outside of the day job, and coming and providing these kind of training for the pure benefit of the people like you, attendee like you, rather than any materialistic benefit. Kudos to you, Krishna. Thanks a lot for all your effort. And I'm looking forward to your session after a couple of sessions like Kubernetes and AI. You're coming back with the cloud data architecture session. Looking forward to that. It's a pleasure to learn from you as always, and continuing to collaborate with you to make sure that we continue to learn from you. Guys, if you wanted to say any words and thanks to Krishna, please feel free to take the floor. He deserves it, guys.
Definitely. Thank you, Krishna.
Yeah, maybe we should unmute and give a clap for him.
Thanks a lot, Krishna.
Awesome. And thanks a lot. See, Krishna, so much of love for you. Awesome. Perfect. Thank you, guys. You all have a great weekend. I'll see you guys next week. And also, I'll see some of you who have been regularly attending the session on the test automation track on Wednesday. Enjoy your weekend. Talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, Krishna, are you there? You went on mute, I guess.